of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, "See everything we do." Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes with Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. Sometimes as a publisher, we discover artists that are absolute rock stars that can really paint circles around everybody. Bob Rohm is an author of a book on painting. He knows how to teach painting, and he has so many secrets. You're going to absolutely love this video. In fact, I sat down with him and he taught me two things, just two little things that changed everything in my painting that I've adopted since then. I hope you enjoy this video.
Welcome. Today I'm going to be painting an aspen piece. I concentrate on shapes and seeing the value ranges of those shapes and getting the local color masked into those values. But today I'm also going to be focused on the intervals between the trees and of the trees themselves. That's a very important part of this kind of painting as opposed to seeing just the shapes. So let me grab the painting. This is where I'm going to work from. This is the aspen piece I'm going to work from. There's some things I don't really care about too much here. I don't like how straight this line of dark is here. I want to angle that a little bit more and make it a little bit more varied in height. I'd also like to bring in more of a shadowed form of tree leaves hanging in here and maybe darken some of the background here a little bit. That'll all emphasize this section here. What I was talking about though is I'm very concerned about the interval space of the trees and the negative space between the trees on this piece. Now the palette that I'm working with, I normally use a primary palette. This case is a cadmium light, cadmium red, and a cobalt blue. I often add a convenience color like a cadmium orange or something. In this case I'm using cadmium yellow deep because for this scene cadmium yellow deep will really come in handy for me in a lot of the mixtures that I need to do. I also work extensively with grays, and I like to work with a dark middle value gray, which we see here. And then I also like to work with a light middle value gray, which is what this one is. Now I often get these out of the tube, just again for convenience. It's very easy to mix these. However, like this is palette scrapings from a previous painting. It's a gray. Very easy to adjust that. But we could take the red, blue, and yellow and make ourselves kind of a grayish color. You can emphasize either one of the three primary colors to shift that gray mixture whichever way you like. In this case I like shifting it toward the yellow because of the kind of painting that we're doing. And then I can take that and add some white to it. Leave some of that pure color over here. And I want to put some white with it. Turn it into kind of a middle value. And this becomes a middle value brownish gray color. Well, again, as I say, we could very easily make it more red or more blue. The more blue you went with, the more gray it would feel. But that kind of matches up value-wise with our light middle value gray. And I would use that quite a bit. Now, I saved this little bit of pure mixture here because I want to tone the canvas. I basically just want to get rid of all this white. I'm not really looking to tone the canvas to paint. It's just that I don't like the glaring white surface. And glaring white surface usually distorts your view of the values. So just knock it down a little bit. I'm working with a series of nylon and bristle brushes. The last few years they seem to have really improved the quality of nylon brushes. It used to be that when you got a nylon bristle, as soon as it hit turpentine, it would turn into little curlicues and stuff. They really hold up much better these days, and they're easier to clean, they last longer. So I've been experimenting with quite a few. But I still go back to the old tried and true bristle flats, which was my preference. For years I used nothing but flat number 6 brush. Right now I'm just, like I say, experimenting with a lot of others. I'm going to use a fairly large, bright brush. This one's nylon. And I just want to get some tone onto this canvas. So just a little mineral spirits, some of that color that I was mixing up. Okay, and it's not going to be that dark. I'm going to tone that down. Should have brought a bigger brush. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's scrub it around. Now, I don't care if I leave much white of the canvas. I just want to get a basic overall tone. And let's put a little bit more mineral spirits on there. Move it around a little bit more. Now, this is a little darker than what I often work with, but again, as I say, I was just toning down the canvas just so I wasn't looking at glaring white. This is a value study that I did of the scene, and like I say, when I was doing it, I was considering what I need to do when I change these shapes. It's kind of what occurs to you afterwards, after the fact, and so we'll just do it in a live demonstration here. Okay, but you can see how we're using dark and dark middle into a middle value and a light on here. So we're still trying to get to a 4-value arrangement of shape and value within the painting. And the trees being backlit are going to be a darker value than what you would normally think of them as. Unlike photographing a regular tree, a lot of times it comes out looking black. Whereas if you stand in nature and paint it, it's really not black. It's a dark middle value, and if it has sunlight on it, it can get very light. With the aspen tree, though, it even when it's backlit and strong contrast, it still doesn't look that black. So now let's begin to draw the basic placement, and I'm just going to use this smaller nylon brush to get started. A little bit of mineral spirits. I don't want to use too much, because if you use too much, you'll make a sloppy, wet mess here, and it'll be next to impossible to cover with paint. So I'm going to start with the blue and the red, very similar to what I did when I was making this other gray. Made myself a little bit of a violet. Since I'm using so much yellow, the violet won't hurt to have in here. Now, I want to get a feel for the canvas. I know this is right in the middle, right here. So I don't want to do that. I want to avoid that. And if we break the canvas into thirds, by breaking it this way and this way, we can pick any one of these points and make the center of interest. I prefer in this particular painting over in this area. So in order to do that, I have to arrange the trees in such a way that they lean and work that direction. So if I put the base of the tree, the main tree, down in this area and then lean it this way, and then we can play with the width of the tree. Okay, I might make it a little thicker than that. Okay, we're going to take a little bit of this violet, make the tree a little bit thicker. That feels pretty good. Don't want to over-lean it. And then we have the other one that's overlapping. And it's up in about this area. Getting close to our center line, so we don't want to overdo that. Now, I don't want to make this tree the same thickness as this other one, but it can be similar, just not the same. Okay, and I end up with this nice wedge of color in between the two trees, and then I can create that really nice strength of light right in this area where the center of interest should be. Now the other tree into the central portion is going to come down into here, and it's very close to the middle of the canvas. So we run the risk of dividing the canvas in two, but hopefully with the center of interest over there, the canvas won't be split. And I am literally splitting the canvas though. So just be aware of that. So if you have problems with the composition, you understand why, that you know what you did that caused it. But I know from experience it's going to work out okay. Now this tree, I'm trying to make a little bit thicker than this one. I mean, it's very subtle, but that difference is going to make the rhythm of the whole painting better, okay? Now, shifting back a little bit, we want to put that tree, this next tree, back a little further, and we want to have these back even further still. So I'm going to indicate that they should go back that far. Okay, and this may be too low already. Let's put it right there. And then this one I want back a little bit further. Okay. These are our main trees. We can add other textures to the painting as we work, but that's where they're going to go. Now you notice I don't have any white paint at this point, even though this scene is very high key and does have a lot of white paint, mostly all white paint. I tend to like to start with fairly clean color and save those colors for later. I mean, this painting, we're going to get into the white real quick. I can tell you that. Again, play with that. Play with the direction of the trees. These are leaning in a little bit because we're getting close to the edge. I don't want to make them lean out. Similar in size to the other ones. Okay. Constantly looking back and forth, trying to make sure that you have good spacing on the trees, you have good placement, that one is not too big or too front from the others. Put these a little closer together than what these are, and even in the study. I mean, the study is just that. It's not, it's a painting to be used for reference. It's not something you have to copy to be literal with it. Okay, and those are looking good. Let's get out here and get this other tree roughed in. And as I say, these are the main trees. See, I don't want to leave the same space between here and here, so let's make sure that we move this one over enough that these spaces are different. Okay. And that one is leaning out of the canvas, so we're just going to straighten it up a little bit. That'll work pretty good. So drawing-wise, that's what's critical to me. The size and placement of the trees. Playing around with the musical rhythm between them. Now, to complete the drawing, I just want to move ahead a little bit and get a sense for the lighting and the shadows that are taking place. So we have cast shadows coming out in here. And they're related to the sun being directly behind these. And we have a little sliver of light peeking through here. Very slight, but anyway. So that's mainly shadow in there. We have shadow extending over here from the light and a little bit here, but this is mainly going to be soft light down in here. Meaning that the sun is being filtered and getting down through there. I'm doing a similar thing here in that the base of the tree is right in here. And then we have the sunlight coming down this way so that it's radiating out from that point. And we just have a little bit of a dip in the ground that creates a shadow there, which continues. We're going to continue over here. And again, a little bit more radiation out from the sun. Okay. And then these trees over in here are in shadow. So we don't have to worry about seeing a light direction from them, although we will see some light moving through here. Kind of like that. Now, I told you I liked the line in the back moving through there, so I'm going to keep it about this height here on this side. But as we come across, I'm going to raise it so that by the time we get to this side, we have a little bit of a diagonal movement. Okay, and I think that'll make the whole painting feel a lot more interesting to do that. Because we do have some shadows working through here. Okay. Now, I also want to bring more shadow definition down this way. And we're going to bring it up through here. Maybe even into here. Okay. So this side is going to be more shadowed than the other. And then over here, I wanted to bring in a little bit of foliage overhanging this tree to cut off that. And we're going to let the light go out here. Okay. So that gives me my main composition in the painting. And now it's a matter of deciding what the value relationship of the painting is going to be. And that's where I've done this little study originally, without this design, of course. but showing the variations in value and color, or value within this painting. With that in mind, I'm going to pick up some of these other value relationships that I have, and I know that my darkest dark is going to be within the tree trunks, where they go into these darker spots in here, and all the little stuff that's taking place up, the little spots up through there, is going to be very important, but it's not going to be important in the early parts of the painting. So first of all, let's just indicate the darks. And as I say, there's some dark shadows down through here. So we'll just make some indications of those. And I'm basically just using the blue and the red for these. We can change that later. This shadow comes all across there. Okay, there's a little bit here. This tree trunk is back here. But this is our little bit of pattern. We don't have a big pattern to dark in a painting like this, but what we do have is very important to us. We carry this dark across here. I can always back off on it if I think that it doesn't work. I say that because I'm not sure that I think it does work. Anyway, I see that as the real pattern of dark within the painting. Now, dark middle value I see as being the area in the back. And now this has white in it because it's a gray, it's a dark gray. So you got to know that from this point on, if you're putting clean color down, that's going to affect it because it has the white in there, and it's going to mix it up. Okay, let's go ahead and raise this up a little bit. Okay. Now I'm also going to put these shadows in that range, although I think the shadows ultimately are going to be lighter than that. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and stick them into that dark middle value range. Feeling pretty heavy. Now, if you want to, you can begin to introduce some of the other color, as long as you're aware of the value relationship. For example, I can start to get some of the red and the yellow into the oranges mixed in with this cool gray. And so that then some of these shadow areas will have color in them. Yeah, those are definitely dark. Now I'm doing all this for a reason, because I want to make the trees this lighter middle value color, at least to start with. And so that's why I'm using this as dark as I am in through here. And let's just get the canvas covered in. Look at it, make some evaluations. Always asking yourself, is the color okay? Is the value okay? Don't be afraid to put color into it. Again, as long as you have the value relationship that you're looking for working. Which I think we do so far. We know those shadowy areas we want cool and dark. So that's the nice thing about a studio painting, is that you can make these kinds of adjustments that you don't do out in the field. Typically out in the field, you're so focused on capturing what's in front of you that you don't really make the proper adjustments for composition like we're doing now. And in terms of seeing something move around, change shape, you're out there, you're focused on, oh, well, there's a straight line there, I'm going to put a straight line there. Okay. So that's what I would consider the dark middle value within the painting. The rest is going to be light and light middle value. Clean the brush off a little bit here. And now I'm going to go to both this color I mixed and to this tube gray that I have out here. And this is where I say I'm going to go ahead and put in the trees in that kind of value, because I don't see them being terribly dark, although I do see them being completely in shadow. Working on an oil primed linen canvas. It's my preferred surface. I do sometimes work on some that are a little smoother than this, but I like the rougher canvas. This one is a Class in 66. I know a lot of the manufacturers put out oil primed linen that has a smoother surface, but I don't feel that that's as good for the landscape as what this is. I'd like to get a little bit of tooth onto that. Now the whites on the trees I'm kind of ignoring at the moment. I mean, they're so small that I know we're adding them. You can see them in here. But I know that they're going to be in there. So I'm just going to kind of ignore them at the moment and know that we're going to be adding them. Okay, I want to make sure that I have the trees consistent in terms of I don't want it thicker at the top than it is at the bottom, those kinds of things. Even at this point, I want to be aware of those kinds of things. You know, you may be looking like here where the drawing extends, but what I'm referencing as a tree laying in the value, that's what's important. Because the drawing is just going to go away. Drawing, if you want to call it that. I'm not a big hardcore literal line drawer. I like to indicate the shapes and placement of things, and then that's it. Now, I left this fairly gray because I see the tone of the trees as being very gray. When I get involved in the foliage, the leaves of the trees, I'm going to definitely add some color into the value. But at this point, I'm not going to be too concerned with it. Just like I'm going to be not going to be concerned with a bunch of the little stuff. For example, I may add in a little tree trunk or two, but I'm not going to worry about that at this point. Again, I'm using just enough mineral spirits to make the paint flow well. I don't want to get the surface all sloppy wet. It's really hard to put paint on if you do that. Like I said before, also I'm not going to be concerned with all these black spots and stuff, textures that you get on an aspen tree at this point. That'll be something we'll add as we go on. And it's a bit meticulous, but it's something I think has to be done if you want to capture the flavor of the aspen tree. Okay, that does a fairly good job, in my opinion, of getting in the gray value of the trees. Now, I did say that I wanted to put some of these other spots in a little darker. So I'm going to go with this cadmium yellow deep and a little bit of red, and stick with this lighter gray value. But I do want to have some leaves hanging down over the trees. So it is the same value as the trees. It's just a different color. It's very important that you do that. Now that one overlaps on the trees. Okay, and the other one I'm going to do in that range is going to be darker. I mean, not darker. It's going to be behind the tree. So you can see how I'm getting a feeling for the shapes of the painting, even though I'm also concerned about the rhythm of the spaces. You know, change this color up all the time. There's no reason to mix big puddles of color. You know, it's nice to have this variety of color in here. Put a little piece of it showing through here. Bring some of it over here. It'll make a transition from the light to the middle to the darker middle. Okay. Okay. Takes time. This is a very important part of the painting to me. This is the whole roadmap of the painting. If I get this wrong, the painting is going to have to go through a lot to be resurrected and fixed. Created a real diamond here. Now there will be leaves overlapping and things like that. I left that little space there because I do want to indicate that we're going to pull something over. I do not like this triangle in here, so I'm going to, even at this stage, I'm going to break it up, make that shape different. Now, as I paint the painting, we'll add a lot of cool color into this, even though right now I'm seeing mostly the local family of that color. And it's mostly an orangish, a dull orangish color, almost a yellow ochre kind of color. And that's what we're going to block in. Now, if I was outdoors and this was the pattern I saw, this is the pattern I would go for. And I would go for it in the same kind of way. I wouldn't just start painting the painting haphazardly. I would definitely take the time to block out these shapes and make sure the value pattern works. And if this value pattern is described by the pattern of sunlight, then as the sunlight changes, it's not going to affect things because you will have the reference already in place. Okay, now let's bring this down. So you can see even at this stage, I'm starting to introduce values into other shapes just to keep them from getting too monotonous. Constantly designing the painting, thinking about the flow, what's going to look like. Think about where you're going to want the strength of the light and shadow, how it's going to flow through there. You want dappled light, you want strong sunlight, you want a strong light direction like we're showing here. Or what do you want? These little things like this, you don't need those at this point, just fill it in. You can add those as you're painting it. Okay, so that pretty well gets the dark middle value and light middle value. And it's hard to imagine, but these are the same value. Okay? It's mainly the difference between the contrast of warm color and cool color. And even though these are shadowed colors, they still feel very warm compared to these trees, which were done with a very cool looking gray. Okay, now the other thing I'm going to do is put in lights. So what I've done now is established my sharpest edge, lightest light, and my darkest dark is down here in the tree trunks. In terms of playing with the shapes, you can manipulate those as you paint the painting, but you've got the basic shape relationship in place. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more of the light moved over through here because I'm not 100% on that shape. I want to just get a feel for what I'm going to do with the lighter color as I move it through. So just breaking this up a little bit, just so that I feel the movement of light and color. Okay. Okay, that's giving me a little bit of sense of what's going to happen light-wise. And I think I know also that I want to bring some light down here. Bring it all the way down. Okay. That way it won't be in the center of interest, but it will be all the way down there. And here, I'm going to bring a piece of light down as well. Good. Okay. So, darkest dark, lightest light, most intense color, and the sharpest edge. Okay? So we have all of our extremes in place. If you want an even more intense color, you can put it straight out of the tube yellow right in here and say, okay, well that's it. That's going to be how intense the color is going to be. It's not going to get any brighter than straight out of the tube. So this basically wraps up my underpainting, and now the next stage is going to be to start painting the scene, creating a little bit of depth in here, getting the strength of the sunlight through these trees, and then developing all the forms.
Hey, would you like to win a beautiful painting worth almost $3,000? We've got a beautiful Joe McGurl plein air study that he's done of the sunset in Maine. It's gorgeous. If you want to have an opportunity to win it, go to paintinggiveaway.com. Just put in your email. That's all you've got to do, and you only need to enter once. We'll be giving away the prize at the end of May. Go to paintinggiveaway.com.
The goal of nearly every painter is to capture a moment in time. Successful paintings help the viewer relive a captured moment in time. But to achieve this, a painting must first overcome each viewer's sense of what looks real. And that's what plein air painters like the most about the challenge of painting outdoors. Developing patterns in their paintings that mimic the little things that we all see and recognize in nature. Trees, bushes, shrubs, they're bold and they're beautiful. Branches and leaves filtering the harsh sunlight, dancing shadows along the ground beneath your feet. Through the centuries, these living elements have captivated the eyes and paintbrushes of just about every style of artist. For some, the greenery enhances the landscape around a beautiful structure, while for others, the trees and their friends are the model, and the artist aims to reproduce all of the grandeur on canvas. You've undoubtedly felt the desire to capture the qualities of one of nature's greatest gifts to nearly every living creature, trees. For all their value in our world, and for all their beauty, trees can give artists a little bit of trouble. Many great artists have set out to paint an amazing grove of trees and ended with a perfect line of what could be seen as uniformed soldiers standing at attention, too similar and too perfect. Trees that aren't grounded into the earth, but floating above it. And whether you're outdoors painting as you see it, or you're working from a study or a photograph, capturing the light behind the trees can play tricks on your mind and your paint palette. But all of the mystery of painting trees ends now, as renowned artist Bob Rohm shows you the techniques and tools he uses to paint a group of aspens that bask in the most gorgeous glow of sunlight. In this instructional video, Bob starts by showing a painting that, to most people, looks pretty good, and then he tells the viewers what is just not right with it: the colors, the light, the shapes. And then you get to watch and learn as Bob adds his own blend of magic to create the real shapes, textures, and details of what aspen trees have to offer. You'll appreciate Bob's teaching method, relaxed and well thought out, the trademark of an experienced artist who has developed a style that communicates the ease and joy of painting. Having painted for most of his life, Bob helps you navigate painting trees from start to finish. If you've ever wanted to paint better trees, now is the time to learn from this master painter. Discover the endless possibilities that painting trees has to offer by adding the video Secrets to Successful Paintings with Bob Rohm to your learning library. It's available on DVD or streaming format.
Well, that was Secrets to Successful Paintings with Bob Rohm. You can learn more about that at lilyartvideo.com. Now let's get to know Bob. What a nice man. Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes, publisher of Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. Today we have Bob Rohm with us. Bob, welcome.
Thank you.
So you're this unbelievably fabulous painter. You've been painting for how long?
I've been painting all my life. Started as a teenager. I quit for a few years after art school. I was in the video and film production business, and it's in the late 80s, I kind of quit that and started painting again.
Well, I want to kind of delve into that a little bit. So what is your first recollection of art or noticing art, being interested?
Geez, when I was really young, I always drew and sketched and stuff. And when I was about 12, my aunt took me to the Philadelphia Museum to see an exhibit of the Impressionists. And that's when I realized that I wanted to do that. I was just blown away. You grew up in Pennsylvania? I did.
Yeah, so did you get to the museums very frequently as a child?
I didn't. My family was not the type that was into the fine arts at all, and my aunt was a little bit more progressive, and so that's why one of the times when I visited her, she took me to the museum, knowing that I had an interest in art.
Was there a particular painting that you can remember that really stood out?
Not a particular painting, but a particular painter, and that was Claude Monet.
Yeah.
And it was just the first one I really discovered, and then shortly after him, it was Edward Hopper that I really locked in on.
So you went through elementary school, drawing and so on, and then you went to art school.
I did, and it was mainly an illustration commercial art school, but they did do some fine art in association with the illustration, and I was more interested in that. Mm-hmm. And some of my friends went on to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts and Temple University. I wasn't able to do that. I had to get out and work. So I got a job with a film company out of art school.
And what kind of things were you doing in the film company?
We were doing industrial films for Kodak and Armstrong World Industries. Mm-hmm. All kinds of training and marketing and that type of thing, non-theatrical type of production.
So I'm always curious when I hear stories about people who were in a job, another industry, and then all of a sudden they quit to become an artist. Was there a seminal moment that you said, I can't do this anymore, I have to focus on my art?
I painted for a long time after art school as a Sunday painter while I earned a living in the film video business. And then that got too demanding and I stopped painting altogether. And then when I went back to painting, I never really left it. I always wanted to paint. And so I got really frustrated with the film video business and dealing with the clients and so forth. So I got a break and I painted several paintings real full time. And that's kind of when I decided that I'm going to get back into art full time. And
so did you just go cold turkey? Did you just quit your job?
No, I was fortunate enough to be well established enough at that time that I was able to freelance when I wanted to as a producer, director, and editor also. So for the next 10 plus years, I would spend most of the winters in the video and film business, and then spend the rest of the year painting. And that's how I made the transition then back to painting full time.
So, as you know, I teach marketing, and I'm always curious about artists and the development of their careers. You've become a very successful artist. You're in 6 galleries, I think, something like that.
At least, yeah.
At least. And so you have been making a living as an artist since those days.
Right.
What was that process like for you? How did you become established? How did you get to the point where you were able to make a living?
Mainly, I had to start teaching workshops, which I probably taught long before I should, but it was because I needed the money.
Why do you say long before you should?
I don't think that I was, my skill level was quite high enough. My knowledge was there, but my skill level wasn't up to it, I don't think.
And how many years did you do workshops?
Oh, long time, since 1990 was when I started with workshops.
And do you still do them?
No, I phased out about 3 years ago. I taught at Ghost Ranch for 25 consecutive years.
Did you really?
Yeah, and that was my longest single location, and I really love Ghost Ranch. But if you'd asked me 4 or 5 years ago if I'd stopped teaching, I'd have told you no. I couldn't envision myself ever not teaching. And then all of a sudden, I just didn't feel like doing it anymore. I think I got tired of the travel as much as anything.
Probably.
So I just phased out, and the past 2 years I did one workshop each related to judging a show. And other than that, this year I haven't done any.
So let that be a lesson, folks. If Bob announces a workshop, jump on it, because he doesn't do very many of them.
Yeah, I keep having people ask. They ask all the time, but I'll let them know if I do.
So now that you have the perspective, you've done this quite a while. Is that the right track for an artist to go, or would you tell them maybe a different track in order to get themselves established?
Probably tell them a different track, because I realized at some point, I don't know exactly when, that if I'd have stuck with painting from art school, it would have really been a struggle for at least the first 10 years. But I could have made it, and I could have succeeded as an artist. I didn't have to go to another career. And that's probably my only regret, is that I did do something else for 15 years and freelance plus beyond that.
So
now that was nice in that it provided much more income than I ever would have had as an artist. But
well, it also provided you some training in other areas. I would imagine in the film industry, you learn a lot about composition and light that probably has applied to your painting.
Sure, and I learned a lot about photography. Used to do a lot of slideshows back then. That was before the digital age.
Right.
So
yeah, it's a lot easier now.
Yeah.
So the advice then that you're giving to artists is once you get out of art school, or once you're ready, just jump into it.
Just pursue it.
Yeah. If
you think you're going to make it and you're willing to make the commitment, then bite the bullet and do it.
I think that's an important lesson, because I encounter so many artists that put it off. I have a friend who's a FedEx driver. He's a fabulous painter, but he says, I really am not going to become a full-time painter till I retire. And that's 20 or 30 years from now. And so he's going to lose all that opportunity. Obviously, he has to make a living, has to support his family. But you're putting it off, and there's probably also a certain age range where you have more strength as a painter, right? You don't lose your energy and so on. Did you find that to be the case?
Absolutely. The peak years are from 30 to 50, and I think it's true of almost anybody physically involved in something. But you really mature at around 40 as a painter, And then between 40 and 50 is really when you're really pushing it great, I think. And so if you give up those years to something else, I don't think it's something you'll ever get back. That I think sets you up for when you do enter your mature years. You have all that from those earlier years to lean back on and fall back on and remember. And if you didn't go through that, you're going to have to try to tackle those when you're in your 60s and 70s, when you don't have the energy that you did back in those days.
Well,
So-
we have a lot of people who come into painting after they've left their careers.
Right.
Maybe they never even had taken it up as a child or college or something, but now they're interested in it. So is there no hope for those people?
Well, there's definitely hope. Some people have an innate ability that they have it whether they spend a lot of time working at it or not. I was one of those people too that said, when I retire, I'm going to go back to painting full time.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the 80s, I had some problems with my eye, my left eye in particular. And I realized, what's going to happen if I get to be 65 and I can't see anymore?
Right.
I'm not going to do the one thing in my life that I always wanted to do. So I first found a way to make that transition and get out of the video and get back into painting, because I did not want to miss painting during my life. And
So once you start becoming a full-time painter, everything changes.
yeah, if that's your passion,
Right.
that's it. Yeah,
But you go from doing nights and weekends like I'm doing
yeah.
to painting all day, every day, or many hours every day.
Right.
How long from that point does it take before you really see maturity set in as an artist?
I don't know that you ever do. I mean, I look back at paintings I did 20 years ago, and there's elements of them that I like better than what I'm doing now. And I look at things I'm doing now and say, there's no way that I would give up this for what I did then.
Right.
So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
I do like the maturing that my painting has done, but it's definitely different than it was. And I don't know that I would judge better or worse. For me, it's better,
Yeah.
not necessarily for sales.
Well, there's a I don't know if it's a myth, but there's this belief that at least if you're doing it 6 or 8 hours a day, 3 or 4 or 5 days a week versus, a little bit on the weekends and nights, that you're just going to get more tuned up. I know when I stop painting for a while, I lose it.
Sure.
I'll take time off and just not do it, and then I'm rusty. But when I go to my event in the Adirondacks, for instance, I paint every day. I paint twice a day. At the beginning of the week, I'm not painting well. By the end of the week, I'm painting really well.
Good.
So
Yeah.
I would imagine that if you're doing that every day consistently for a long period of time, you're going to see a positive curve.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
Because every once in a while you hit layoffs, and for whatever reason that is, business or family, whatever, and you definitely notice a difference. And it takes a day or two to get back into the swing of things.
So what's it like having to feed 5 or 6 or 7 galleries enough art that they're going to have art to sell and enough that you can make a living?
Unfortunately, it's not a problem for me because they don't sell that quickly.
Yeah.
Some artists sell virtually everything they paint, and for them it would be a problem. They can only handle 1 or 2 galleries at the most.
Uh-huh.
But for me, I keep them well supplied and occasionally have to trade things out. So
And do you paint pretty fast?
I do.
Yeah.
I've always been a fairly quick painter. I think painting plein air helps develop that into an artist. You tend to do things in a style that you can accomplish in 2 to 3 hours. And so if you do that a lot when you're painting indoors, you kind of adopt that same style, even though you don't have the same constraints on you that you do outside.
So did you start out as a plein air painter, or is this something you discovered somewhere along the way?
I discovered it along the way. I mean, I did do some of it back in art school way back when, but it was never a thing. It was mostly working live from the subject more than it was experiencing the outdoors.
So people tell me that they have pretty interesting changes in their work once they start going outdoors.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that.
Well, I know for a fact the first 2 years I painted outdoors, I threw away everything I did. And even to this day, when I go outdoors, I never paint outdoors with the intent of getting a finished painting for the gallery. If it happens, great, but that's never my intent. Whereas if I'm in the studio, I expect every painting coming off the easel to be a gallery painting. And so that's a mindset that's just totally different.
So it removes the pressure, doesn't it? It creates pressure in the studio, but it removes the pressure outside.
Well, it needs to, because one of the things that I found a lot of students getting hung up with is that they were always concerned painting outdoors that they did a masterpiece and they did something really good. And that's not what was important.
Right. What
was important was seeing those elements and getting the proper relationships down. And once they got that, that's what mattered, not whether they had something they could take home and put in the gallery or take home and stick in a frame.
Can you talk about what those relationships are?
Having the good color relationships from dark to light, capturing a good value relationship in terms of what the scene is. Do you have a pattern of high key, middle key, low key? Do you make sure you have a dominance over one or the other? And mostly it's capturing the relationships, because you picked a scene for a particular reason. So now it's a question of making sure that you get those relationships. Don't get the sky too light or dark for what the scene was that attracted you, and don't get the trees too light or dark for the scene that attracted you.
Well, and so you're always making a comparison.
All the time.
All the time. Sky to trees, trees to grass, trees to rocks, everything that you do.
Right.
You're relating one to the other.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to design the canvas right away to determine where you're going to have the center of interest or what would work as a center of interest. Not in terms of rendering detail, but in terms of maybe that's the strongest contrast, brightest color, what have you. And getting that located compositionally within the painting. And then from that point on, making sure that your inner relationships all hold together and work well.
So what are your philosophies on composition? There are lots of different approaches to it, as you know. You've probably heard them all.
Yeah, my simplest approach is just to use the rule of thirds. I divide the canvas top to bottom, horizontal, vertically, in thirds, and then that gives you 4 intersecting points.
So it's like a tic-tac-toe board.
Right, and any one of those 4 points is an ideal location for the center of interest. So it doesn't matter which one of those 4 you choose, but put something there and make that your center of interest.
Now, do you, some people will put a center of interest in one of those intersections of the lines, but they'll also try to put something else of interest in those other places.
Sure.
Do you do that?
Yes, absolutely. You want to lead the eye around the painting.
And how does the eye come in? Does the eye read like left to right, right to left?
I think normally it comes in from the left to the right. And generally you're trying to make a circle around many ways like the Nautilus shell and end up at that central point where your center of interest is.
And what kind of tools do you use to try to drive the eye? Because it's real easy. We see a lot of people will take the eye right off the canvas, for instance.
Yeah.
What are the things that will help lead the eye, and what are the things that take the eye away?
The eye is drawn to warm color and contrast. So anytime you want to attract the eye to a particular spot, just increase the color temperature or the contrast in that spot and then let it move on. Don't be careful not to make it compete with your center of interest, though. So I usually try to establish the strength of my center of interest, not resolve it, but describe the strength of it right from the start. And that way I can, as I develop the painting, I can make those elements move and guide you around. Now, that same kind of contrast and warmth of color on the edge will take the eye right out. So you may have a very warm area and a strong contrast on the edge. You just have to minimize that. It's like a white tablecloth in a still life. You never want to paint it white down at the edges. You always want to gray it off down to the lower parts so that the eye will never go down there onto the edge and off, but it will follow it around to your center subject.
So when you go outdoors, do you paint you look at the scene, you probably do a sketch?
No, not anymore.
No. Okay.
I used to do sketches a lot. Now I just go right for the canvas.
And do you put your center of interest in first and then work your way out?
No, I usually I identify it. I know where it is, but I block in the structure of the shapes and start with the dark masses and how the darks tie in and move you to the center of interest. Okay, that's kind of how I start. So again, I know where it is before I put brush on canvas, but I don't necessarily put it there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
I also believe in pushing edges back and forth. I love the beauty of sliding paint around the canvas. I don't ever draw like a coloring book and then fill in the spaces and be married to a hard realism line drawing. I love just getting a rough placement of where things are and then pushing things, because I love what happens to the paint on the edges as you slide things back and forth.
And do you paint pretty thick?
It varies. Sometimes it does get very thick, but there are plenty of times when it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And what about shadow areas? Some people have different philosophies about shadows. Color of shadows, temperature of shadows, transparency of shadows. Do you have any thoughts on any of those?
Yeah, I always try to keep the shadows simple. Keep all your detail and information in the lights. Make sure your shadow relates to the color of the sky. Even if you're only showing the horizon, envision what the sky is overhead, and then make sure that the sky is reflected in the shadows. For example, if you have a blue sky day, don't make your shadows purple or violet. They always have to relate. That goes back to what all the painters always said. They always said, make sure that any landscape you do has a piece of the sky. They're not talking about literally seeing the sky, but they are talking about seeing the color of the sky reflected into the shadow planes.
So what I think I hear you saying is if the sky is blue, the shadows are blue?
Yes, absolutely.
And if the sky is yellow, the shadows are yellow?
Right. If it's a hazy, bright day with very gray sky, then the shadows are going to be kind of colorless and be more of a gray tone. They may even be warm. They won't necessarily be cool, depending on what the rest of the scene looks like. They may just be darker than the lighter areas. Of course, in a completely overcast, you don't get any shadows. But a cast shadow is always lighter than an upright shadow because it's getting the reflected light from the sky, where the upright shadow is not. It's not getting any reflected light. Or if it is, it's getting it from another object, which changes the color completely. But with the cast shadow, it's always getting the skylight, and it's always going to be that color.
Interesting. I'm curious about how your painting has changed over the years. You started out in one particular direction. Are you doing things pretty much the same way you've always done them, using the same colors?
No, there's been quite a change in some ways. I used to use a lot of earth colors early on. I think that's mainly because of experience with mixing, that you tend to use a lot of the earth tones because you're not comfortable mixing them. But very quickly I went to a warm and cool primary palette, and then I pretty much stuck with that for a long time.
Can you explain what that is to the people who might not know?
I always had 2 yellows, 2 reds, and 2 blues. And those blues might be something like a cerulean blue and an ultramarine, or it might be a cobalt blue and even a viridian green, something like that.
So one of them is warm and one of them is cool.
Right. Cobalt being the coldest blue you can have. In the reds, a lot of times I would go with an alizarin and a cad red light. And in the yellows, I would go with a cad yellow light and a cad yellow deep. That way we always had the warm and cool. Some people prefer the cadmium lemon, but that was always too cold for me. I didn't go that far on that.
And so you said used to. What are you doing now?
Now I've gotten pretty much into just a primary red, yellow, blue palette. I do vary that a little bit once in a while. For example, most of the time I put a second warm color out, like a cad yellow deep or cadmium orange, or maybe even a cad red, but only one of those. Sometimes I put out 1 or 2 blues, depending on the amount of blue, cool color in the scene. But I'm also always using grays now, and I didn't do that before. I always have a middle value gray on my palette. It seems to have done a lot for me in terms of improving the structure of the painting. It keeps my key of value in the painting from getting too far one way or the other. And I might have a mass of middle value tree, as an example, that I may have used too many lights and darks, too many colors that change value too much. Whereas if I use some of that middle value to mix those colors, I tend to stay truer with the value range of that mass of color within the tree.
So you're not painting the gray direct, you're putting the gray into the colors.
Correct. And I do sometimes put the gray down as direct and then add color to it. And it is surprising how little the gray tends to affect the color. You can still put the color into the gray and still achieve all the color you want. I've really been surprised by that over the years. I would have thought that the gray would really muddy and dirty the colors, but it really hasn't seemed to do that. Now I do use a pretty neutral gray. I try not to stay overly warm or cool with it because that would muddy depending on which mixture you put it into.
And do you find that the taste of your paintings has changed over the years? For instance, as I mature, I find that I'm using less garish color. You know, I used to use very acidic greens, for instance, because that's what I would see, and I tried to represent what I would see, but those acidic greens don't read well in a painting oftentimes. I mean, some people can pull it off. I can't.
I've always been kind of led by my subject. Sometimes I do use too garish a color, but if I go out and paint on a spring day and it's brilliant greens, I'm going to put brilliant garish green in my paint. And if I go out in the fall and have lots of bright yellows and oranges, that's what's going to be in my painting. So I'm kind of, I've gotten a lot more neutral tones into my paintings over the years, and I think that's where I've improved a lot. But I still definitely use garish color if that's what I'm looking at. So,
well, it takes a master to pull that off.
well, I wouldn't go that far. But the thing I do have a lot of trouble with are flowers, because a lot of times flowers are way too brilliant for the color palette that I'm used to working with.
Right.
And so sometimes if I know I'm going to be painting some really bright, brilliant flowers, I will have to throw a color on my palette that will hold up. For example, I use a lot of mineral colors, not man-made colors. Man-made colors tend to hold up really well as you add white to them. So, for example, your reds, you want to use phthalo reds and phthalo red rose if you're going to paint those really luscious pinks in flowers. Because the cadmium reds, like I'm using, when you add white to those, they really dull down, and you're not going to get any vivid flowers out of them. So
that's a good tip.
Watch what color you're using, knowing your subject.
So for the beginner who's watching this, who maybe this is the first time they've picked up their brush, maybe they're learning from scratch, what is the process that you recommend someone follow when they're learning to paint? Is there a way that they can maybe take some shortcuts so that they don't have to go through years of experience? Are there certain things that will help them get along faster?
I don't think there's any real shortcuts, but I do think if you concentrate on visualizing the shapes and getting the structure of the painting down so that you have a good value relationship, that's most critical, whether you ever finish the paintings or not. If you concentrate on making that work, just doing lots of really good starts and making that plan work, then you can start concentrating on what is the temperature of the colors. Is the painting mostly warm color or cool color? So now you've got good value relationships, so now you get good color temperature relationships working. And then you can start manipulating those shapes and modifying all those shapes so that you may have a mass of a mountain that is all kind of a blue-gray color. Suddenly you can start putting some cool grade greens and some cool grade violets, but all the values are correct. And that way that mountain plane now has all that liveliness of color, but it still structurally holds where it's supposed to. And the same with the foreground trees or whatever subject you're looking at. So initially just see those flat shapes, then begin to modify them. So I would describe that as starts. Just do lots of starts.
The tendency of a new painter is to put all the detail in
Oh,
first,
absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So you're basically saying, squint down, look for big shapes.
Right, forget the detail.
Yeah.
If you're worried about detail, take a pencil and a sketchbook and concentrate on detail. If you want to learn to paint, concentrate on the shapes. You can always add that detail to the painting, but you need to start with the structure of the painting first. So if you want to develop your ability to draw, that's fine, but don't try to combine the two too early. Make sure that you understand the structure of painting first.
How do you create form? What's the process to make something look like it's three-dimensional?
I always tell people to envision carving something three-dimensionally out of clay. So if they were sculpting these edges three-dimensionally, what would that look like? Which way would the brushwork go? And how would that look? And as that's seen, catching the light, is this plane up here going to be a little darker? Is it going to catch some of the skylight, be cooler? Is it going to be over here and get some of the reflected light off of this other object? What will that sculpted form look like? And what will those planes of that shape look like? A bush is a perfect example of that. You can look at a bush, and if your light direction is coming from the side, your shadow side's over here, your object next to it may be casting really beautiful reflected light onto the shadow side. The top may be catching lots of wonderful light from the sky. You may get the warmth of the sunlight hitting it, and then you have the shadow side, which is very neutral to the color of the bush. So you can have a whole range of color in that one object.
Well, Bob, thanks for coming in today. It's a pleasure to talk painting with you and to learn from you. I've learned a couple of things already that I didn't really fully understand, so it's been very helpful.
Oh, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. It's been fun for me as well.
Thanks for coming in.
Okay, good.
Well, that was Bob Rohm and Secrets to Successful Paintings, and you can learn more about it at lilyartvideo.com. I really appreciate you tuning in and watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. I'm Eric Rhodes.
The goal of nearly every painter is to capture a moment in time. Successful paintings help the viewer relive a captured moment in time. But to achieve this, a painting must first overcome each viewer's sense of what looks real. And that's what plein air painters like the most about the challenge of painting outdoors. Developing patterns in their paintings that mimic the little things that we all see and recognize in nature. Trees, bushes, shrubs, they're bold and they're beautiful. Branches and leaves filtering the harsh sunlight, dancing shadows along the ground beneath your feet. Through the centuries, these living elements have captivated the eyes and paintbrushes of just about every style of artist. For some, the greenery enhances the landscape around a beautiful structure, while for others, the trees and their friends are the model, and the artist aims to reproduce all of the grandeur on canvas. You've undoubtedly felt the desire to capture the qualities of one of nature's greatest gifts to nearly every living creature, trees. For all their value in our world, and for all their beauty, trees can give artists a little bit of trouble. Many great artists have set out to paint an amazing grove of trees and ended with a perfect line of what could be seen as uniformed soldiers standing at attention, too similar and too perfect. Trees that aren't grounded into the earth, but floating above it. And whether you're outdoors painting as you see it, or you're working from a study or photograph, capturing the light behind the trees can play tricks on your mind and your paint palette. But all of the mystery of painting trees ends now, as renowned artist Bob Rohm shows you the techniques and tools he uses to paint a group of aspens that bask in the most gorgeous glow of sunlight. In this instructional video, Bob starts by showing a painting that, to most people, looks pretty good, and then he tells the viewers what is just not right with it: the colors, the light, the shapes. And then you get to watch and learn as Bob adds his own blend of magic to create the real shapes, textures, and details of what aspen trees have to offer. You'll appreciate Bob's teaching method, relaxed and well thought out, the trademark of an experienced artist who has developed a style that communicates the ease and joy of painting. Having painted for most of his life, Bob helps you navigate painting trees from start to finish. If you've ever wanted to paint better trees, now is the time to learn from this master painter. Discover the endless possibilities that painting trees has to offer by adding the video Secrets to Successful Paintings with Bob Rohm to your learning library. It's available on DVD or streaming format.